Hello, my name is Eric Montague, and for our historical reenactment, I'm going to make my grandmother's potatoes. My grandmother lived with us when I was growing up. In her old age, she lived with us from about my age of about 3 to around the time that I left high school. She was fantastic, and she grew up in the Great Depression, and so it was very interesting to grow up in a middle-income home, but with our grandma living with us because she was raised during the Great Depression and she was extremely frugal. And I always remember her talking about how potatoes were the mainstay. That's all they had, and so she found really good ways to make them. One life lesson that I remember from her and about her frugality, when I left home, I will never forget how she taught me how to be frugal. One of the ways that sticks with me that she taught me how to be frugal was that you only needed a quarter-sized dollop of shampoo and conditioner when you wash your hair, and if that was the case, it would last you for a lot of months. So that's one piece of advice from her. The other piece of advice we're going to talk about today is how to make potatoes that are delicious when that's all you have to live on. Our ingredients for our potatoes today are pretty simple. You need red potatoes, butter, sour cream, Clabber baking powder, and salt. One trick to consider when you're cooking potatoes is, as you begin to prepare all the ingredients, is to start your water getting warm and boiling so that it's ready to go when the potatoes are ready. Otherwise it takes a long time to get it boiling. If you do it this way, your potatoes will be done a lot quicker. With our potatoes here, one thing that we need to do next is we got to go ahead and clean all of them. So this recipe calls for 5 pounds of potatoes, and you just throw them in the sink and scrub them a little bit and make sure that all the dirt or grime is off of them. And then once we get through washing all these, we'll cut them up, but I'll show you a couple things that need to be done there. When you're doing your potatoes, you need to peel them before you cut them up. And one thing that's a key ingredient is good tomatoes is, as you're skinning them, you want to leave some of the skin on. Not only is the skin very nutritious, it also gives it a lot of good flavor. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel all of these and then move on to cutting them in just a second. I'm ready to cut the potatoes now. When you're cutting the potatoes, you want to cut them in about inch-by-inch squares or inch-by-inch cubes, something close to that. One thing you want to make sure before you start cutting them is you want to make sure in the process of skinning them, you have taken out any bad potatoes. A bad potato would be one that's green or rotten. You never want to eat a green potato. They're very bad for you. Also, you've cut out any roots or cut out any rotten spots or anything that just seems like it's a bad piece of the potato. You want to make sure you've cleared all those out before you start cutting them, and then go ahead and cut all of them about an inch by an inch. I've gotten the potatoes all cut. I removed any that were bad or any that had bad parts in them, and now I'm just going to start putting them into the hot water and getting them going, boiling, so that they'll be ready to go. You want them to boil to the point where they're very soft to crush with a fork. Depends on how long it takes. One last thing before I finish doing that, once you get your potatoes in the water, one thing that you want to add to the mix is you want to add some salt. Adding salt to the water not only makes it boil hotter, it gives a nice salt smell to or a small salt taste to the potatoes. I just threw in about a tablespoon of salt into this whole pot of water. I'm waiting for the potatoes to boil. I thought I'd tell a story or two about my grandma. She had 13 children over 2 marriages. She started very young. I think she had her first child at 16 and her last child at 51. And one of the things that I always remember about her is I always asked her how she did it, how she raised so many kids and how she financially afforded it. And I think it's very apropos today as we're cooking potatoes. She always said, it was no big deal. We just threw another potato into the kettle. And I think that spirit is just the spirit we need in America today, where we can get things done and make things happen with whatever resources we can find. So we're going to finish up the potatoes here. They're getting to boil really good, and they should be getting to the point where they're ready to mash here in a couple minutes. You'll need a strainer for that. You may want to get some of your salt ready, the powder, the baking powder, get the butter unwrapped, and get your little thing of sour cream opened up. And then we'll mix it all up and have some delicious potatoes. Our potatoes are done cooking. I've checked a couple of them. They are super soft, ready to mash. So I'm gonna go ahead and come down here and turn off the heat. And then you're gonna meet me over here in a second. I'm gonna take the strainer out. I've got a strainer there on the table, and we're going to dump the potatoes into the strainer, get all the water out of them. So I have the potatoes all cooked. I'm gonna go ahead and strain out the water now. I'm gonna use that pot here in just a second. So I'm gonna grab these potatoes with a hot pad. I'm gonna put them in that pot, and then we'll go through the ingredients. Okay, so I'm gonna take these butter sticks here. I've kind of cut them up so that they're easily split apart. Just gonna toss them in here for the 5 pounds of potatoes. One of the things to make them delicious is butter. So I'm putting in 3 sticks of butter into the 5 pounds of potatoes. I told you at the beginning to have 4 sticks of butter. The reason for the 4th is just in case anyone wants to make their potatoes that are already super buttery, even more buttery. You have more to throw on your table. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a little bit of this baking powder. So it's Clabber baking powder, and I'm just gonna dust the top. Not too much more than that, that's perfect. And then I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of salt into the potatoes. I kind of do it by sight, add a couple tablespoons. And then at the end, once we've mashed all these, you want to taste it for salt and see if you want any more. I'm also going to throw in some sour cream here. Got to get a spoon. I'm gonna put about half of that 1 pound thing of sour cream into there. Okay, I added the sour cream, and now I just got to mash it all up. So as you're mashing, you'll go through, you'll get them to where they're totally beaten down, and you want to get it to where they are essentially nothing more than a really good thick puree. You don't want to leave a lot of clumps in any way. So I'll mash all those up. Kind of takes 2 hands, can't do it with the camera, but you just want to get a really good mix and get them really mashed up well, and then we'll taste them, see how they're doing, and see if we need to throw in a little more salt. Okay, I'm done mashing it, got a good workout there. You can see in here the consistency, it's still pretty thick, like it'll hold that up. Very strong. I mean, it's not milky or soupy at all. All the lumps are gone, so it's just nice and creamy, and the baking powder gives it a good fluffiness. And now I'm just gonna taste it and see how it's doing, and we can see if it needs any salt. Those are delicious. Delicious potatoes, those are perfect. So half a pound of sour cream, just a light dusting with a Clabber baking powder, about 2 tablespoons of salt in there. I also threw a tablespoon of salt when I was cooking them, inch by inch cubes, and you can live forever on those delicious potatoes. Have a great day. I miss my grandma. She passed away 20 years ago, and I just miss her a ton. And she was a great person to have in my home. And every time I have these potatoes, I think of her, and just brings back those memories of the stories she'd tell us about the Great Depression and how hard it was living through all of that. So we'll eat some delicious potatoes that were made during the Great Depression time.